No deal.
Yamas!
All right. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you very much. Yeah, yourself?
I am not bad. Like I said, I just ran from one side of the studio and I am wearing a novelty dragon costume. So a little hot, a little winded, but I'll get over it.
Looking good.
Oh, well, thank you very much, sir. You look fantastic yourself. And I do see you've got a little, what do you call it? You've got some Zenescope behind you, too.
Yeah, there's a few bits and bobs there somewhere.
Awesome. Yeah, that is actually one of my favorite covers that you've done for us, especially
There
recently.
Oh, wrong way.
Oh, that looks great, dude. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. Oh, hey, Eric, everybody in the comment section is saying hello, too. John says hi. Eric says he is fangirling as well right now.
Eric Concepcion. Yes.
Concepcion. Yes, sir.
Hello, everybody.
Well, it's so great to have you
out there.
How's your day going so far?
The day's going very well. I've just this minute finished work. I've been working perhaps about 10 hours now, which is a little bit longer than usual, but I wanted to keep myself occupied. But I got a little bit distracted, so I've only just logged in.
Hey, no worries, man. It's cool. You're in the moment. You're in the zone. You know, you don't want to break that. All right. So without further ado, I want to jump into some of these questions.
Yeah, by all means.
All right. Awesome. So first, I guess I want to start at the very beginning, you know, where it all started. What made you want to pursue a career in comics?
I think that's quite easy to answer, really. I started basically this.
Nice.
This came out in 1977, and in the UK, and especially in Sheffield, there were no comic shops. The best you could hope for was a Spider-Man or a Superman occasionally in a high street newsagents, but there were no comic shops in Sheffield. Then this came along.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, exactly. Now this is a later edition. This is not the first edition like the Star Wars one, but these came along and opened my eyes up. I mean, I was already a big fan of fantasy and sci-fi, like most people who are into comics. You know, all the old films of Ray Harryhausen, $6 Million Man on TV, you know, Logan's Run, Dune, loved all that stuff. But then comics came along, and funnily enough, that same year, I think it was the same year, a comic shop, the first ever in Sheffield, opened up probably about half a kilometre away from home, and you couldn't keep me away from it. It introduced me to all the artists that I still love today.
That's awesome. And so now and first off, I'm glad you mentioned Logan's Run, because that I feel is like an underappreciated movie.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's actually a film that I thought would have been remade or got a reboot, but nothing. There's been absolutely no word of it. So I hope they leave it alone.
Yes. I honestly, because I think I love Barbarella too. Like, yeah. I love a lot of those early, like, because I think was Logan's Run before Star Wars?
Yeah, it was.
Pre-77. So yeah. So any of those like pre-Star Wars sci-fi films where they're still kind of like, you know, buffing out the corners, you know, fixing out the bugs and everything.
Absolutely.
But I love them in that form.
Yeah, exactly. And without those films, because I mean, let's face it, some of them weren't so great, but at the time we loved them anyway, you know. But if it wasn't for those films, we would never have had Star Wars. We've never ever had all the great action movies, all the great sci-fi and fantasy movies that we have today. But I mean, back in the 1970s and the 1980s as well, you know, you were lucky if you got 2 or 3 of those films a year. You know, you had your summer blockbusters. You might have had 1 or 2, perhaps even 3, depending on what was coming out. And Christmas, that was a huge target for action films, fantasy films, sci-fi films. And today we get them all the time. So it's like you've got to be spot on if you're bringing out a film these days. Otherwise, it's going to get panned straight away.
Yeah, and buried underneath, you know, like 100 other films too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So is it safe to say that kind of like when those other comics got introduced, the Star Wars, the 2000 AD, the sci-fi, like you're saying, like that was kind of like the big moment where you were like, oh, like there's other, you know, these are artists, these are writers, these are, you know, worlds that I can jump into myself.
Yeah, but I was quite young at the time. It was something that I wanted to do, but that came much, much later, much later indeed. I mean, I did go to art college. I've always been able to draw to some extent, um, but my first job wasn't artistic at all. I was working in retail, working for Games Workshop. I did that for a couple of years. Then I made a transition over to their design studio down in Nottingham, where I was commissioning artists for their games and their monthly magazine, White Dwarf. And then I made another transition into the video games market for about 15, 16 years, worked on about 20 titles, where I started as an artist, became a designer, later became a producer. And at some point I was doing all three things at the same time. But they were fun times. They really were. But it was shortly after that I made the decision that it was now or never. You know, so I took my portfolio, went down to to an art convention, a comics convention. I think it was in Bristol, where I met up with Harry Marcos of Marcosia Comics, and he gave me a brief stint, a 4-issue stint on Starship Troopers, and on the back of that, I got a 7-issue deal working on Flash Gordon. And since then, I've been working on numerous projects, numerous covers, and I just seem to fit straight into the Zenescope mold. You know, perhaps it wouldn't have happened 10 years before. You know, my style has changed, but yeah, I'm loving it. Absolutely loving it.
Well, I'm glad, man. It makes me happy when I hear that, you know, people are enjoying what they're doing. But I know definitely the fans love it too. A lot of love coming through the comments section as well. A lot of people saying hi. Somebody was saying proud original art owner as well, Phil Whitslig here.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know Phil. Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah. So what if you don't mind me asking, like what year do you think that was? Like when you like the Starship Troopers, the what else did you say? The Flash Gordon. When did you get put onto those titles?
I think we're looking probably about 15 years ago, 15 years, maybe 14 for Flash Gordon, 13. I also worked on Overrun. That was a 4-issue series. And for Earth Outlaws, which if you can see up here, that was for Molly Schofield at BMA Studios. I'm still working with Molly. I've got a couple of covers coming up for a new IP. But that should be starting on those, I think, next month. But yeah, I've got a lot of irons in the fires at the moment, but it's been 15, 16 years or so that I've been working in comics now. And let's hope it goes on for another 15 or 16 years until my hands fall off anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, do it till you drop, man. That's the way.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw like BB King at a concert one time, and you know, dude couldn't stand. He was sitting but he could wail guitar. You know, he was doing that right up until the end.
Exactly.
So yeah, I do think it's interesting that you mentioned your fascination with some of like those earlier sci-fi movies, and then Flash Gordon and Starship Troopers as adaptations. I mean, both of those movies fantastic, and I love them.
Yeah.
But being able to do those comic books must have been super exciting.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I was familiar with Starship Troopers from the books, Robert Heinlein back in the 1960s, and although there were a lot of changes to them, it was still a great movie, and the comics were very good as well. They had some great writers working at Marcosia.
Yeah, that's so it's that kind of like the moment then that you would say that like you were like you were hooked, like you were in the industry at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. Inside I was, yeah, but whether or not the industry was going to accept me at that point, I hadn't got a clue. It's been, you know, I had to work at it for a few years before I felt confident that I could make a go of it, and I could sustain myself and find, you know, the work that I wanted, and enough work at the same time. So it took maybe 3 or 4 years, I reckon, to get to that stage, and I'm quite comfortable now. It's I don't have to look for work, which for an artist or a writer or anyone who's been creative, that's just an absolute blessing. It really is, because when I first started, I would say possibly up to about 50% of my time was looking for work.
Wow.
And of course, it's the fans who keep you where you are. Without them, where would we be?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you get enough exposure too. I mean, like you're all over. I mean, like I see your stuff everywhere, especially when I'm at like conventions and things too. So like you're out there, and I think people have that, that recognition. That's gotta, build up for something too, I imagine.
Yeah, I reckon so too. Yeah, I don't see much of that myself. I just don't get the time to go to as many conventions as I would like to. And most of the time when I go to conventions, it's as a guest. So you may have seen me.
So when was when you had mentioned Zenescope briefly and how kind of your style ended up, fitting into the Zenescope's mold. Do you remember what or like when you became aware of Zenescope? Kind of like when they entered your consciousness? Did you know of them before you started working with them? Or was it kind of like they worked with you and then, how'd that happen?
No, I was aware of Zenescope. I think, to be quite honest, I think we both started about the same time. So I've been familiar with your with your company. I've been familiar with your products, your comics, the artists, the writers. But I actually, at the time, I never actually thought it was possible that I would eventually end up working with you. So that all started maybe 7 years ago. I was working with Richard Ems on Flash Gordon, and he introduced me to Ralph. We got talking, and he said, "Do you fancy doing a cover or two for us?" So I did, and it's not stopped since. So I must be doing something right. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'm not very good at self-analyzing these things. I really am not.
Yeah, but I don't think you have to. It's one of those things where, just go with the flow.
Yeah, you're right. You're too right. Go with the flow. That's kind of what I have been doing. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
But it seems Eric is definitely saying that your work is kind of what drew him to Zenescope. And I would say that that's the same for a lot of people as well.
That's fantastic.
Well, actually, here's a great question, if you don't mind, from Jeremy. And what I was going to ask myself was, do you remember what your first Zenescope cover was?
I do, yeah. I think I sent along some examples of some of my earlier stuff, and I think it's in there.
I did send. I uploaded a few of them. Unfortunately, our streaming platform has like limited data, so I did bring up. You sent over a few. One that I brought was the Jean Grey cosplay.
Yeah, that was quite recent actually. But I think my first cover was a NASCAR cover for maybe for a convention.
We'll see if I can find that back here. But no, I do know the one that you're talking about. She's got like a pink jumpsuit almost, right?
I think it's two girls on the cover, two of your characters.
Gotcha. But I will say, if you're all right, switching topics just a little bit, I had some questions about your creative process, because I was looking at some of these sketches and I was like, oh, first off, beautiful work. But I was seeing here the Alice, the one that you actually have there, presented, the most recent remix cover. And so obviously you went with number 3.
That's right, yeah.
So I was curious what the purpose of, and I'm a novice, so I apologize if this is a dumb question, but you have this big black bold bar behind Alice on there. What's the purpose of that?
Artistic license.
Okay.
Just because it looks good. I mean, quite often I will do the initial rough layouts, and they are very, very rough. I spend no more than an hour or two on 3 that I submit to Dave for each cover. From there, before I go to final original art, I'll spend a bit of time doing these production sketches, as I call them. But sometimes I do get a little bit carried away with them. They're not quite as rough as I first intended them to be, so I do finish them. And this is a prime example of that. On this particular one, I'll do a close up because I'm trying to work out the expression on the face. That's really key for me. You get the expression on the face right, the rest will follow. But yeah, I tend to go overboard sometimes on the artwork, and that's just the way it is with me. It's an old habit that dies hard, I'm afraid.
No, but I think I don't know, not for nothing, but I think I'd rather have like more than less, Like I think the fact that
Yeah,
you're passionate and dedicated as you are. I mean, you said yourself you were working for 10 hours today,
yeah, that's not
plugging away.
typical. That isn't typical, but it does happen, especially when the deadline's coming up.
Gotcha. So for all intents and purposes, this is like a finished or near finished, piece that kind of just
Yeah,
didn't end up getting used, because then you did go for the actual like a little bit of like a further out shot with the Alice font in the background.
yeah. Well, this is actually the original artwork. This will be scanned, taken into Photoshop, and then I'll do the digital links on top. I mean, quite often I will change things as I go. So the covers that you see won't always follow the original artwork perfectly. I think sometimes you have to be a little bit more creative. I certainly do anyway. If you come up with a better idea, go with it, submit it. You can always get refused, but that doesn't happen very often. But yeah, this is the actual finished original artwork. That one's, I think most of my work is done on A3 size pencils, and occasionally a few Copics on there as well.
Gotcha. And so then this would be once you've digitized it, so you've
Yeah,
brought it into the computer realm.
exactly. Yeah, they are the finished digital inks.
Gotcha. Now another question: when you do like your topless variants, because I noticed I didn't upload those here just because I don't know what I'm allowed to show and what I can't with YouTube and Facebook permissions.
You're a wise man.
But so when you do the topless variants, when does that come in during the process?
Well, all of the variants, because some of the covers, there's usually either a topless one or a change of costume. I mean, I think I've worked on a couple of covers where there's probably there's the original cover, a standard cover, and there may be 3 patches. So I have to bear all those in mind, not only when I'm working on them, but for layout as well. Whether or not where the hands are, if there's a topless patch, is she going to be clutching underwear? Is there some other prop that she's going to use? And also, sometimes with the absence of clothing, the pose can look a little bit out. So I have to work on that as well at the same time. So, but yeah, all the patch stuff comes into play at the digital stage. I occasionally might tinker around on paper, but yeah, I know exactly where I'm going with the patches by the time I get to digital stage, and all that's done on layers, so I can just turn the layer on and off. Standard costume, topless, lingerie, or any other variant that that might be asked for.
Gotcha. And I do. Is it all right if I show you some of the Jean Grey cosplays too?
Oh yeah,
because I love kind of what you were talking about going there, dare I say above and beyond. There were a lot of different variants in terms of like the process here.
Yeah, I actually added a couple of my own as well that
nice.
weren't asked for. Submitted them, and I think one was retained and the other one was discarded. But yeah, I sometimes get a little bit carried away with myself.
Yeah, but again, I don't see a problem with that. As long as you're okay doing it, I feel like the more like, and I don't know about you, but I feel like sometimes like even if something doesn't get used, it's like an idea for the future, all right, like I like this, but maybe this isn't the right cover for it. Maybe I'll save it and use it for something else.
I do that. Yes, very much. Yeah.
Because I will say I absolutely love And I don't think that this made it to the final book. Maybe it did, and I'm wrong, so I apologize. But like the little dragon wings within the mask, like you've
Yeah,
got that kind of like Zenescope logo that you've incorporated into her costume. Because
yeah,
this is, I think, what ended up happening
yeah.
with like the more simplified mask. But I really do like that dragon wing looking thing.
To be honest, right now I can't actually remember if that was used in any of the actual final versions, but it was asked for, so I drew it. It's a simple patch, mask on, mask off.
Yeah, it's crazy how you know did the digital tool set has changed, you know, kind of the creative process. You can kind of start off and do all of this stuff on pencil and then, buff out the details. But let me see with a bit A. It's like at a doctor's eye exam or something, like give me A, give me B. A1, A2. Okay, looks good. Let's go with A2.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but these were absolutely phenomenal. Again, that's why, like, I know I'm getting a little off script, and I apologize, but I really wanted to ask because I was like, oh my gosh, these all look great, and like, I would have had a hard time deciding myself between like, because I like the little like beam that you put up here, but then this is like very kind of like dramatic, almost like the movie, the ratio shrinking down for focus.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I like what you're doing. Keep up.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It really is. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, man. We appreciate it. And I know I'm not just speaking for myself here. Trent was asking, do you often like sell those extra ones or do you keep them for yourself as sort of like a, portfolio, that type of thing?
Yeah, I retain most of them, but I do occasionally have an art sale. Not as often as I used to. But yeah, I mean, it used to be. I used to sell some of my work, the original art, the layouts. Um, I used to sell them maybe once every couple of months. They used to be quite popular, but these days it's been very sporadic. But I'm getting to a stage now where I'd like to keep a few of them. you know.
Well, when they look like that, I'm not surprised, you know?
Yeah, but my arm gets twisted every now and again, and they do come out of the portfolio, and they do get listed, and they go pretty much straight away. And I'm as surprised as anybody else when that happens. I'm very very humbled by it. I really am.
Well, I just saw a comment here from, I think, Glenn saying he has 157 Zenescope covers by Paul Green. So you have
Wow.
done a lot of content.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, you just, especially even with like the variants themselves, but even beyond that, I mean, think about like, you're doing 12 minimum,
Yeah.
this year with the candy cosplays.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you,
Yeah. I think it's at the moment I'm doing about 2 a month. So that's 24 a year. Then we have all the variants, the patches, and even for me, who I can't keep up with how many I've done. I started off compiling a list that went out the window a long time ago. So how many covers I've done? There must be somebody out there who knows exactly how many I've done. Please, if you know, write in.
Dude, I absolutely, someone will. People
Yeah.
have got me on, and honestly, I will say John Potton's doing me a solid here. He says that that
Hi,
Jean Grey
John.
cosplay does have the dragon mask. It looks like, so I apologize.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, John.
Yeah, see, some of these guys know more than I do, man. But when you
And
have an
me.
extensive catalog like yours, there's a lot to catch up on.
Absolutely.
Well, I kind of wanted to ask, and here's a question. Eddie Hernandez was saying, what's your favorite Zenescope character to draw?
Alice.
Alice. Is that now when they did the remix covers, did they approach you and say Alice, or did you approach them and say, I want to do Alice?
No, I think I was the first person to be asked, and I was given a list of characters, and I immediately wrote back Alice. Yeah, she's my favourite character by a country mile. I've got
Wow.
another artist remix coming up next month as well. But I need to contact Dave just to see if I can do another Alice. If not, that's fine. It really isn't. It's fine, absolutely. But Alice is my favourite character, and I think she always will be.
Nice.
It's not. It's not just her. It's not just her character. It's not just the stories. It's the way she looks as well. The costume's just perfect for me. I love drawing it.
Well, I can absolutely tell. Like, I'm glad that you said that, because especially in that last Alice cover, I mean, even the detail in like all of like, I don't know what you call it, like the underdress,
Yeah,
the fluff, the part of that like classical attire,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do like Alice very, very much. So fingers crossed, I get to do another Alice next month. And the artist remix covers are great because there's no brief. Just do what you want. If we don't like it, we'll let you know, obviously.
Yeah.
But and that's very, 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 very freeing and liberating for any artist.
Yeah. Trent Warner is saying in the comments, let Paul do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't agree more. But no, that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons I love the remix subscription, because it's like, okay, everybody just go, have fun,
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
yourself, be creative, let it all out.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't know whose idea it was. Probably Dave, maybe Ralph. I don't know, but whoever came up with that idea, let's do a lot more.
Please,
Yeah.
whoever authority figures are listening to this, please. So I wanted to ask also, you work a lot with Oola Moss, and I know Ralph had asked that question. I actually did see that there was a question in the comments as well relating to Oola Moss. So when did you start with your collaboration? Like, when did you guys kind of first team up?
Well, the first few covers that I worked on for Zenescope, I did my own colors. It was requested that I did my own colors, probably because I was new, and there are limited resources. But it wasn't long before either Dave or Ralph suggested using Oola, and I was familiar with Oola's work. I went, yeah, go for it. I think Oola's work will definitely complement my lines. And well, it's been a few years down the line. We're still going strong.
Now, are
I,
you like,
I, I don't have any input into what Oola does, and I don't want any input either, because I always think an artist works better, but when there are no constraints really. So, like we were saying about the artist remix covers, just get on with what you want. I think Dave is responsible for the colours, and he with every aspect of the cover. But to be quite honest, Oola can do whatever she wants.
no, it's the same thing as the remix, man. Let the artist do their thing,
Yeah,
But that's so great that
exactly.
you guys kind of had this natural, like almost like symbiotic, connection.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, does it? Maybe it
No,
was accidental, maybe it was fate. I don't really know, but it works, and long may it go on for.
yes, please.
If
I know I want. I know the fans want it too.
Yeah, and if I'm working on covers for non-Zenescope covers, I will always ask the client if it's possible that we use Oola. I mean, occasionally, a client will say, "Well, I've got somebody in mind," which is fair enough. But the vast majority of the time, it's Oola.
Yeah, and it works out.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Other question I wanted to ask, because you were saying, you were working on some covers earlier today, and I know that you obviously put a lot of effort and work into designing the covers and trying different things out. How long would you say a typical Zenescope cover takes you? Like, from the time that you kind of get assigned a book, when do you have that finished? Like, all right, here's the ball, it's in your court, go.
What you mean from layouts to final inks?
Yeah.
Typically, I would say between 2 and 4 days, but that depends mainly on if there's any narrative content or any background details. I mean, the majority of my stuff, there's very little background. It's all character, and Oola's colours really makes that cover ping. It really does, as you all know. So yeah, anything between 2 4 days.
All right. I got to ask, speaking too, because I know that these probably take like a little bit longer, just with the amount of like detail and like little, bits here and there.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite cereal cover or a favorite candy cover if you had to pick?
Serial cover. Yeah, I think that's the Cinderella cover. And as for
Oh, the
the
Cinderella.
serial,
That's the Loco Puffs, right?
yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to remember. And as for the candy box covers, I think it's probably the one that I've just finished, which I can't talk about.
You're right. I apologize.
Otherwise, the comic Men in Black will be around. But you'll be seeing that one quite shortly.
All right. So all of you Zenescope and Paul Green fans in the audience, stay tuned. You got me hyped up.
All I'll say is it features Jasmine.
Oh, well then I know my boy Neil Sonkrat in the comments is gonna go crazy. He loves Jasmine.
Brilliant.
I also one last question. Well,
Sure.
one of our last questions, just because we're running out of time, unfortunately. I'd love to talk all day. But did you have like who would you say would be your biggest inspirations? Like I know you pointed to kind of like, those like, early sci-fi comics, 2000 AD, that type of stuff. Were there any artists in particular that you were like, this guy, this girl, this
Yeah.
is, who I love?
Absolutely. Same today as it was back when I bought my first comics. That would be Brian Bolland. Love his lines. Absolutely gorgeous work. Never fails to deliver. And notoriously slow, but who cares? When you're bringing out work of that quality, then who cares how slow you are? Obviously, you've got to factor that into your schedule, obviously, because you're working with Brian Bolland. But the man is an absolute legend to me, a god, and I love everything that he's ever done. So yeah, I think that's some of his work there as well.
Oh, sweet. And he did a lot of did he do Animal Man, right? With Vertigo?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
The Killing Joke. That's one of my favorite comics.
Yes, absolutely. I will say
not only is it drawn by my favorite comic book artist, but it's also written by my favorite author as well. So
yeah. And I have to say the original like Killing Joke, the colors in that original Killing Joke too, just like because you were talking Oola and like those pops, the oranges, the purples, the gradients. I mean, the first time I read the original, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, and I say the original because I think they did a remastered where they kind of toned everything down.
Yeah.
But those original colors are just so vibrant and just like you were saying, they tie everything together,
They are, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they are very, very vibrant. And when you look at them, there's actually not that much color variation there because they just don't want to distract from Bolland's line work. And why would you? But it works. It complements itself so well.
Awesome. Now, those are all great answers. Like there were no wrong answers to begin with, but those were all great answers regardless.
Is there ever a wrong answer with art? I mean, really?
Excellent point. That's gonna be, I think, the quote of the interview. Is there ever a wrong answer with art? Paul Green, 2023. Yeah, exactly. There you go. You got it. Well, last question. Actually, you know what? Here's a good last question to end on. Mark is asking if there is a character that you would like to do that you haven't done yet.
Oh,
either Zenescope, although I know you've probably gone through the whole catalog, or just in general, like a dream project?
Yeah. Although I don't think it fits my style anymore, I would love to do a Judge Dredd. I'm an English boy. I like my English comics. I love American comics, of course, but my roots were back in the day with all the British artists and writers. I would love to do a Judge Dredd spin-off series following Judge Anderson. I know that it's been done before many times. You ever had your own comic, but yeah, I'd like to work on a Judge Dredd spin-off of Judge Anderson.
That's awesome, man. That again, perfect answer.
Easy answer.
And I will say, I appreciate how like easy and like instant some of your like the fact that you knew right off the bat Alice number one, Brian Boland, Alan Moore, done number one.
Yeah. You're asking me about stuff that I know about. So if you ask me about other things, you probably wouldn't get such concise answers. So.
Well, we'll definitely make sure to stick to the comic book centered questions.
I will.
Yes. But Paul, we unfortunately we are out of time, so we got to go. But we absolutely loved having you on our stream. I can't thank you enough. Fans loved having you here as well. Hopefully we can have you on again another time in the future. But thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Thank you for joining us. It was an absolute delight to have you, sir.
Thanks for having me, and a happy birthday to everyone.
Happy birthday to everybody, man. Thank you so much. Have a good night, man. Thanks for joining.
Cheers now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.